I just want to take a moment to talk about a really important topic. Recently, there has been some discussion about the amount that the UK spends on social security. In particular, you may have seen claims that the UK now spends more on welfare than it raises through income tax, which is the government's biggest source of revenue.
Now, we are spending more on benefits, on welfare benefits, than we're taking in income tax. That's the first time that's ever happened. Now, that is frightening. And if you don't think that's frightening, how do you think government is financed? Because it's either financed by taxes or by borrowing. There isn't really any other way of financing our welfare state and all the public services that we have. There really isn't. And we've got to live in the real world, not this world where we would love to spend lots more money on all sorts of weird and wonderful things. We can't do it if the money isn't there.
So, I just want to add some context to those figures. Social Security essentially covers things like pensions, disability and unemployment, among other things. According to the Office for Budget Responsibility, the UK is expected to spend around £303 billion or 10.9% of GDP on social security. Over the same period, income tax is forecast to raise around £329 billion. Now, this is obviously a significant figure, but it's worth noting that income tax is just one part of the tax system. For example, in 2024 to 2025, VAT raised £173 billion, while national insurance contributions raised £171 billion. So welfare isn't being funded by income tax alone, but rather the entire tax system. It's also important to understand where that money actually goes. The OBR estimates that around £161 billion will be spent on pensioner benefits in 2025 to 2026. Estimates from the Department of Work and Pensions puts the figure for just Great Britain significantly higher at £178 billion. These differences arise due to differences in what is categorised as pensioner benefits. But regardless of the exact categorisation, pensions are the largest component of social security, and with an ageing population, that cost is likely to continue rising. Therefore, you shouldn't come away with the impression that all welfare is undeserved. That said, there is still a legitimate debate about whether the overall welfare budget should be reduced. One area often discussed is the so-called triple lock. This policy ensures the state pension rises each year by the highest of inflation, wage growth, or a minimum of 2.5%. However, even if the triple lock were scrapped, the savings would be relatively small because pensions would still typically rise in line with earnings. Estimates suggest this would only save around £750 million by the end of the decade, which is very small compared to total spending. In order to make significant savings, the government would likely have to reduce the real value of the state pension, for example by increasing it more slowly than inflation, which would make pensioners worse off in real terms. As you can imagine, that's politically very difficult. Nevertheless, I think it's something the government should consider given the financial situation. Another area to look at for savings is disability payments. The government has already signalled that it may tighten eligibility for personal independence payments or PIP. I think this is completely reasonable given that in 2024, around 4 in 10 new PIP claims concerned psychiatric disorders rather than physical disabilities. Now, I understand that some people might disagree with this argument, but as I say in almost all of my videos at this point, if the UK doesn't spend more on its defence, we are going to be attacked by Russia. Evidence for Russia's growing aggression can be seen in the fact that John Healey, the UK's Defence Secretary, just announced that British warships and aircrafts have been tracking Russian submarines that were surveilling undersea infrastructure in the North Atlantic. Therefore, given the immense threat that we face as a nation, trade-offs are going to have to be made.